I've been hearing about this so-called male loneliness epidemic for several years, and it has got to stop. This misconception it's just absolutely widely baseless, and apparently no one can find empirical sources to support the claim. From what I can tell, most of the time, men aren't lonely. They're focused, and they're simply unavailable for nonsense and other crap that's going on. Let me put this into a little bit of real-world perspective. I have the benefit of looking back over 20 years, a 20-year reflection while preparing my book, Confessions, for paperback print. It's over 900 pages that I hand wrote in real time during the darkest times of my life. They were absolutely lonely, as I was the father of 3, and my then wife admitted to me about her multiple affairs that ended our 11-year marriage. So throughout that time, I hand wrote for 2.25 years. For almost 2.5 years, I sat down and I wrote on 246 different days. In those raw, unfiltered moments, I wrote the word lonely or loneliness 34 times. And every time I wrote it, I was so curious, I had to go back and actually look under what context did I write the word lonely or situations in which I felt lonely. Every time I wrote that in this book, in my journal during those times, it marked part of my process as rebuilding after the implosion of my marriage. Sometimes, yes, written in painful moments of being lonely. Many times as areas of growth, but every time I wrote about being lonely during those nearly 2.5 years, it was always a step forward. And what I realized was that being lonely served me 2 main purposes through those darkest times of my life. And I'm sure that this probably also explains a lot of your experience as well. So let me see if I can break this down for you. The first purpose for my loneliness, the first purpose that it served, was personal growth and learning to be okay, to be just fine on my own, which is an extremely important quality that far too few people ever achieve. Most people are so terrified of being alone that they never reach the emotional maturity needed to make decisions on their own, to not chase after validation, and to not get caught up in codependency. So here's just a few quotes that I wrote during those darkest periods of my life, in which I wrote about being alone and how it helped me. I feel lonely all day when there's no one to hang out with, when it's just me and the girls. Right now I'm feeling lonely, confused, helpless, and hopeless. No anger though. I really don't get angry much anymore. I've actually felt pretty good, despite being lonely and bored. Right, so those are just a few instances in which I was in my early 30s, had 3 young daughters, got married at a very young age, and had never spent any time alone in the 33 or 34 years that I had lived up to that point. I had to learn how to make decisions for and by myself without anyone's assistance. I had to learn how to be okay with being alone. And was it lonely? Yeah, it was absolutely lonely. But it was the first time really in my life that I'd ever had to be in that situation. I needed to go through that growing process, that emotional maturity of being lonely and understanding how it felt so that I could have reliance on myself. Right? So that's the first way in which I realized now, 20 years later, how being lonely served me a great purpose. It helped me to mature. And the second way that I realized that being lonely during those periods really helped me out was being so busy rebuilding my life that I didn't have time to socialize or to get sidetracked from my security, from my goals, from rebuilding my life. So what I did was I threw myself into everything I could for long-term security, so that I simply didn't have time for anything else. Here's just a few examples of loneliness serving its purpose as far as being busy, reaching my goals, and creating a better future, a long-term outcome for myself. See if I can find this here. It's been quite lonely, but I've spent some time doing homework. Being so busy has been good, but I'd like to have someone to talk to about my life and my feelings. It doesn't overburden me though. I just get lonely if I stop long enough to think about it. I'm so busy and alone, not necessarily lonely these days. Feelings of sadness, loneliness, and frustration do serve me well when it comes to studying and planning for my future. Right? So that's the second way in which I had to go through that loneliness period. I made myself so busy finishing undergrad, getting my master's degree, my doctoral degree, writing and publishing research, presenting my research at conferences all across the Midwest and the East Coast. I didn't date. Was I lonely? Again, yes, absolutely it was lonely. There was a lot of times I wish that I would have, or I would have liked to have someone in my life to talk to. But I didn't have time for all of that because I was on to bigger and better things. I mean, there were times that I would go days without talking to anyone and weeks without socializing. And that's because I had intentionally put myself into situations that dominated my time, like finishing my doctorate degree, publishing my research, working 3 jobs, and spending as much time as I could with my daughters. That's where loneliness comes, when it's you against the world. And this is the danger of labeling men as lonely, especially within the negative context of it being an epidemic. Because the way I see it, being alone or lonely isn't always negative, and I would even argue that more people should be lonely in order to go balls out to improve their lives, right? Because if we're at happy hour every Friday, or calling our softball buddies every time we have a question, or relying on our mothers, our fathers, or women to talk to and to work out life's issues, then we're not growing internally. We're stagnant when we do that. We're not building. Sometimes being alone is necessary, and it's a net positive. So for those of you who are out there and people would label you as lonely, although you may in fact feel lonely, but it's served and it's backed by a purpose, I get it. I understand that that loneliness is real for you, and I appreciate it. I admire that for you. But I mean, it's a byproduct of taking command of our lives, right? So for me, loneliness was necessary during and after such a painful time in which I really didn't have a lot going on for me. It was necessary for me to not socialize, to not have hobbies, especially, with other people that would consume and suck up my time. I didn't need to get sucked into relationships because I was on to bigger and better things. And I've been rewarded tremendously for it. So this is what I want you to take away from this. And I'd love to hear your stories and get your feedback. Just because men don't talk to or hang out with as many people as women do, doesn't mean that they're lonely. It doesn't mean that it has a negative effect on them. In fact, many times men choose to be alone and to handle their own challenges as they continue to mature emotionally and to build their futures, and they're better for it. So fellas, stick around because I'm about to post part 2 of this very short loneliness series, and I'm going to flip the script to expose the female neediness epidemic. Because men are not the ones who go crying to mommy or looking for friends' validation every time we feel lonely. We process loneliness differently by understanding that it's necessary and it's healthy, rather than a character flaw that needs to be shamed as a way to conform to the feminist agenda. If you want to learn more about the importance and benefit of men's loneliness as they use it as a way to progress and to build their lives, look in the description for a link for my 600-page full book, Confessions. It'll be available on Amazon starting July 13th. But to get a free sample ahead of time, go to the link in the description, rowpress.com. That'll also put you on my email list, so you'll get a notification as we get closer to launch date. But that was just really been on my mind. It just destroys me. It's just so frustrating that people put such a negative connotation on loneliness as if negative outcomes are the only result. And it's just simply not true. But let me know what you think.